Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'll tell you what, today's guest, his energy already has me so excited about the way that he not only operates in life, but especially in business, because he has such incredible visions about the cohesiveness that business strategy should bring to a brand, to the experience behind it, all that good stuff. He talks about branding in really interesting ways. So I'm excited about this. Let me tell you about today's guest. His name is Imri Larsen. Imri is an award-winning creative leader who is obsessed with nurturing both great ideas and talent. From launching new startups coming out of stealth to leading brand and design strategy for Fortune 500 companies across the globe, Imri excels at steering cross-functional alignment, building end-to-end teams, and implementing new technologies into his work. Known as the consummate orchestrator, Imri uniquely applies a holistic skill set across brand strategy, visual identity, verbal expression, experience innovation, and performance branding to expertly coordinate and integrate the right story with the right creative across the right portfolio of touch points. I think today's episode is going to make a lot of us re-examine the ways that we show up as entrepreneurs, the way that our businesses show up in the world, our brands. I think all of these things are really intertwined, and I hope that's what we walk away from today's session with. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Imri Larsen. All right, Imri, I'm so excited for you to be here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Heck yeah. And I will say for listeners know my love for LA, having lived there for quite some time. You are joining us from the City of Angels, so particularly excited about that. It's also a great intro, actually, for me. I don't know why I brought geography up, but it's a great intro and segue for you to tell us how the heck you got here. How'd you fall into all the amazing work that you get to do today?
Yeah. So, I think I, like many other people, have quite the wandering path to really get to where I am today. But where it all started is fresh out of college, I found myself in finance. So I was actually working at Goldman Sachs in private wealth management. And I realized pretty quickly into that was not quite the path for me. So I actually quit that career path and went back to school to study multidisciplinary design. And it was really once I entered the workforce after completing my second degree that I stumbled into the world of design, actually helping, this has been many years ago, but it used to be that JetBlue only had one class of service. And I was lucky enough to help them define a new path and a new chart for their business where we were introducing a front cabin experience and holistically looking at how their brand could stay egalitarian. Keep that egalitarian spirit as we introduced a premium first class and other innovations in the air. So from there, I really dug in and started pursuing design full-heartedly, moved to New York, where I worked at many big branding agencies. And in more recent years, moved to the Bay Area to run those design and brand teams in-house, where I could really be closer to the decision making and the real pain points and challenges that brands face today. And just about a year ago, launched Ariel with my partner and am looking at shaping brands and identities for all different types of startups through established companies and really bringing actionable strategy and effective creative to our clients and our projects. So in a nutshell, that's kind of my wandering path that brought me to where I am today.
Yeah, I love that, Imri, and you're spot on. Obviously, for all of us as entrepreneurs, it's been a wandering path. I always say it's kind of been a theme of our content here in 2023 is that the journey is what prepares you. What we're preparing for, we never know until we actually get there. So I love the way you shared that, particularly because what I think kind of shined through in the way that you express that, Imri, is how even your own attitude and perception towards this. At the beginning part of your journey, you talk about design, and here we are at the end, you start talking about making strategic decisions. You talk about being closer to decision makers, and you wove the word identity in there. And I think it's so interesting about the way that your company, Ariel, operates. It is front and center on your website. I'm going to read it for listeners because I'm looking at your site. They're not as they're on the go. But it says, identity is the manifestation of an organization's soul, told across every single touch point, exchange, and interaction. Imri, that's some big visionary stuff. That's not the way most people talk about branding. What the heck is identity? Why is that so at the core? I know you're intentional with your words. What is it about identity that's so meaningful to you?
Yeah, no, I love how you picked up on that immediately. Well, in our world, branding has, it falls in and out of favor for different reasons. And I think we're really at the beginning of a new era where there is an increase focused on what brand and branding is and can do. But ultimately, identity, as you said, we strongly believe is the manifestation of an organization's soul told across every single touch point. And what we mean by that is that in today's world, channels are moving so quickly. One decision that Meta makes about their ecosystem can completely shift and change an organization's go-to-market tactics and strategies. And so what we work with our clients on is to really arm them with a malleable brand and what we call identity that is philosophically aligns the organization and relies on, once again, that actionable strategy. I could go off on a tangent about how often creatives are handed a strategy that isn't actionable, but really it's about using creative and and design to really make an impact in the individual business. Because if design and creativity isn't making an impact to the bottom line, then its value is not there. So we try to create a higher order of brand that is truly grounded in the philosophical alignment of an organization that speaks to what's true about the brand, what the needs and wants of their customers are, and really aligning brand, product, and experience. Because in today's world, the brand is the product, is the experience. People don't spend a lot of time figuring out what you're all about, and it's more important to have that alignment in order to be successful and cut through the noise in our busy world.
Yeah, Imri, I love the way you talk about that. Where my brain goes as I'm hearing you talk about this is, so typically when we talk about branding, I have a tendency, we've obviously had branding experts on the show countless times over 700 plus episodes, and I have a tendency to ask, what is a brand? Because it's something we talk about so much, but it's not something that's so easy to define, because a brand is really, ethereally, it's everything. It's not even related to what we're presenting. It's related to what other people are saying. You brought up JetBlue. I can't tell you how many amazing conversations I've had with fellow travelers about how great JetBlue is. And what we talk about is not their logo. We don't talk about the great shade of blue. I love their visual identity, but we talk about unlimited, awesome snacks. Not any snacks, but really good snacks. We talk about they were pioneers for free Wi-Fi in flight. You talked about JetBlue Mint. As someone who's from Boston, who lived in LA, JetBlue Mint, that route is incredible for travelers who go there. So the brand is so many things, but Imran, what I'm hearing from you is that identity is, even if we go up the hierarchical structure, identity encompasses not just the brand, which is one big facet of business, but also the product, but also the experience. And I love how you view this on equal footing, that these things are all equal to each other, and the identity is what aligns that and shapes that. Talk to us about that hierarchical or relational structure between all of these ingredients, because I'd argue 99% of businesses don't have your level of intention behind that alignment right there, even at a high level.
Oh, 100%. Like, I think that it's pretty challenging to a lot of people's preconceived notions about what brand is when we talk about identity being an alignment between the brand, the product, and experience. Because ultimately, brand is an intangible asset. It is the amalgamation of all of the ways that you make people feel, the colors that you own that signal the brand, the experience touch points like what you're talking about with JetBlue. Just to carry that experience that I worked on early on in my career, it was a really interesting, like JetBlue knew that they were about this egalitarian spirit. They were about this access. They were about innovating. They not only pioneered Wi-Fi in the sky, but they were also the first ones to have live TV and leather seats in every single seat on cabin. So as part of that project and introducing JetBlue Mint, we had to be really innovative and experimental in thinking about, okay, if we are introducing this front cabin experience and we want to make sure that it's accessible and seems like something that anybody could really book, how do we marry that with what people already know and love about the brand? And so we were very adamant that we not introduce curtains or any sort of divider between those cabins as a first touch point. And as a second touch point, because JetBlue was really known about their free full-size snacks, we also introduced a self-service pantry station in between the classes that whether you're a JetBlue Mint customer or you're in the back cabin, you can come there and enjoy the same benefits that are handed out to every person on a JetBlue flight, and also introduce that opportunity for mingling there. But really, the power of brand is that in today's world where there's hyper competition, there's a lot of more savviness on the consumer side of things. 85% of a company's value is in intangible assets. So that can be things like their talent, that can be things like their brand, that can be things like about their ethos or their ability to stoke and get news coverage. But about 25% of those intangible assets of every company is their brand. It's that when you see that Coca-Cola red, you know that that's Coke. It's when you see the Velo with Airbnb, like you have an association about this belonging and this idea of what the brand stands for and what that ethos is. What we really work on quite deeply, and I think what's really different about Ariel is that we also engage with product leaders and experience leaders across the board to make sure that there is that philosophical alignment across brand, product, and experience, so that you can have a malleable identity and an intuition built into an organization and teams about, what's our brand's way to approach this? If we're really about X, how do we bring that to life in this webinar, in this product launch, in our product roadmap? How can we, make sure that we're speaking with one voice and all coming from the same point? And it's very challenging to do this type of work, but when people realize that everybody has a hand in the experience, everybody has a hand in the brand, and everybody can help, through that understanding, help shape the product and how you go to market is really where the true value and success comes in, from implementing an identity focus into your organization.
Yeah, Imri, I want to call something huge out for listeners right here, right now, because I think that the more brilliant someone is, the more subtle and simple it feels. And I feel like hearing your thought process out loud in front of us all here today is incredible, because I think there's so much brilliance in there, particularly what I hear, the way that you talk about, we're rolling obviously right now with JetBlue as an example, is that anytime you're talking about JetBlue, you're coming from it, you call it the philosophical alignment, but what I'm hearing is you're coming from it from a values perspective, is you're not saying, how do we strategically from a marketing and sales perspective have two different cabins? You're saying, hey, we value egalitarianism. What does egalitarianism look like when it comes to our rollout of new cabins? Whereas I think that a lot of people confuse branding, and we've all gone through those exercises. What do we care about as a brand? But that doesn't manifest into the way we strategically make decisions. So I want to call that out for listeners, is hear what Imri is sharing with us. It's not just about having the values, it's about letting the values drive those decisions. How can we make it show up? I love that you called out a webinar. How can I make my values show up, manifest themselves in the way I present a webinar or host a webinar, the webinar experience before people even show up, after the webinar is over? So I love that tangible example. The other thing I want to call out and where I'd love to go from here, Imri, is I think it's fascinating. Here we are on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast, and your work, you've worked with big businesses like the JetBlues of the world, but also brand new businesses. And I know that one of your core beliefs is that even large companies need that entrepreneurial spirit. What is it about this spirit? Because I say so frequently with guests, I'm like, you're one of us. You're a fellow entrepreneur. You understand the entrepreneurial spirit. What is it about that spirit that we can all take away from it and let that inspire the way we excitedly pursue identity and all of these things?
Yeah. So I think what's really interesting about what you're saying right here is that large companies can really benefit from infusing that entrepreneurial spirit into their own work. Because let's be honest, there's disruptors, like it's never been easier to establish and disrupt a company with the advances in technology and our new ways of engaging and communicating. So while large companies absolutely need to infuse that entrepreneurial spirit in their businesses to be successful and to ward off competition, the same is true on the inverse. So when we work a lot with startups. Sometimes it's startups coming out of stealth. Sometimes it's somewhat mature startups, somewhere in the Series D to Series G realm, where they're eyeing an IPO or some sort of exit. And what we are able to bring to them is the rigor and the discipline that large corporations and companies and brands often have into how they shape their brands. So let me give you an example. This is a project that actually hasn't launched, but we're working with a private wealth management company, and they are all about this exclusivity, and their clients are ultra high net worth individuals. So we're talking $30 million and up in their in their personal net worth. And what we were able to create for them is an elite and luxury experience that is all facilitated and based on word of mouth. We've had to create an entirely new digital engagement that's based on referrals, a whole new web experience that's personalized to these folks based on what the individual agents know about these clients. And then almost creating an air of mystery to help drive and stoke interest. So while that may be true, while it's true that the entrepreneurial spirit needs to be infused in these larger, more established brands, startups can really benefit from the rigor, the research, and the established and best practices that larger corporations have used to establish their brands as well.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point, because especially when you say established, coming back to JetBlue, for example, and I'm excited to transition more into the startup world, because when we talk about JetBlue, I mean, I flew on JetBlue, before it was the JetBlue that we knew today, or that we know today. And they've obviously evolved. And I think that such a core part of their evolution is that when you're in the marketplace, when you have customers, when you have feedback, it's much easier to start adjusting. But I can imagine it's really difficult out of the gates. You talk about how many great companies are coming out of San Francisco, how many great companies are popping up all across the country, out of incubators, out of so much stuff. And Imri, they don't have that data. They haven't gone to market just yet. How do you even start to do that? Because I would imagine part of our identity, or correct me if I'm wrong, I really want to hear your perspective on this. Part of our identity is not just how we view ourselves, but how our customers react to this stuff. How do you navigate that world?
Yeah, so I think it's never too early to starting to figure out where and how you get that input that's going to make an impact in your brand. Even if you are just starting out, it is so invaluable. Talk to the people that you're targeting. If you do have a few early customers, get into their heads, ask them questions, figure out what is driving them and how you're uniquely poised to really meet their needs, both from a product level, but also emotionally, having that empathy and understanding of what they're going through and what sort of relief or benefit that you are uniquely able to offer. So while large corporations have the benefit of being established in market, maybe some brand recognition, and then the resources to do really in-depth research, that doesn't mean that startups can't use these same tactics at the scale in which they currently are. Take, for instance, I used to lead a brand for Curology, and what was really important for us was the performance marketing that was a big driver of that business also was an invaluable source of customer sentiment and understanding that helped us shape and continually improve our brand. I think the big trapping of a lot of brand work is that you think that it's one workflow, you define it, and then you put in your guidelines and you're done. But truly, in order to have a malleable identity that's really going to impact markets and help shape your business, you have to continually be going back to the well. You have to continually be, challenging your assumptions. You have to really, wherever you are, you can start applying this rigor and this discipline. And it can be as simple as, okay, if we're a brand that's all about belonging, okay, does this action that we're going to market with, how does that communicate that belonging? How do we get to that emotional truth that we know or that we are hanging our hat on to really build our brand? It's always, the resources are always going to be an issue, no matter what scale you're at. So it's really about leveraging the reality of where you are and what sort of information you have to glean from that can be a starting point, no matter where you are on your journey.
Yeah, Imri, you said the words malleable identity. I think that's such an important takeaway. I think so many of us as entrepreneurs, we love being solutions providers. We love finding answers, but the older I get, the wiser I get, the more mature I get as a person, but especially as an entrepreneur, I start to realize, no, the best people are not married to any of these things. So few things. That's why we have that phrase colloquially in English, this too shall pass, is that all of these things, everything in life is temporary. And so I think that malleable identity, something that's always evolving, always growing, it's such an important mindset. And I think it reveals a lot about the way that you view identities and brands. And with that in mind, I also think we got some insights from you into what that workflow looks like. It's what I'm hearing is a clear level of intentionality from you, whether it's talking to customers, whether it's looking at your existing data, whether it's examining the landscape of what's out there in your industry. Walk us through some of those other points, because I would imagine that some of your work is kind of the soft, mushy work where it's asking about values, asking about those philosophical alignments that we're looking for. How do we even go about that? Is it a series of questions? Is it a series of looking at your business? There's so much to it. I'm dying to hear your thoughts on it.
Yes. So it really boils down to two distinct workflows. So I started Ariel with Joyce Chung. She's my partner, and she runs our strategy practice. So the first half is really that actionable strategy piece, that comes from asking questions, working with founders, and really figuring out, first of all, what is the vision? Where do we want to be in 30 years? And that answer lies on the inside of a company. That's usually with our founders. That's usually with our C-suite. That's with key stakeholders that, should be a very small subset that can visualize a world in 30 years where there is going to be completely different dynamics. Take, for instance, one of our current clients that we're working on defining their vision and mission with, made the realization through our work with them that in 30 years, AI is going to be table stakes. So what kind of world will there be in 30 years, and how will that impact our vision that we're trying to create in the future? So then that next step down that we use in our brand strategy framework is our mission. Okay, if we have our vision that's 30 years out, then our mission is, what are we going to do every day to work towards that? What is going to be our focus? For some I think really successful brand strategies, the vision will be category agnostic, or there will be, like, everybody aspires for a day that their technology can be applied across multiple different verticals or categories or markets. But a lot of times that mission is extremely important for driving alignment with your founding teams, your agencies, your partners, whatever else that may be. And then in order to articulate how you go to market, that's where the importance of brand positioning is that next step. So with positioning, it's what's that one idea that you're going to be famous for? To carry through the JetBlue example, that was egalitarianism. Airbnb is very famous for being known about belonging. It's a simple phrase, idea, emotion that you then go to market with. So once you have done this foundational work and have that alignment about what's the future we're going to try to create, how are we going to go about that doing that every day, and in market, what's that one idea? One idea. I know the one idea is going to be really a struggle because there's always going to be conflicting priorities that, you're going to want to do more than just having that one idea. But what's going to be that one idea that propels you? And then once you have that one idea, then that's where you get into effective creative. That's where your copywriting, your brand voice, your visual identity, how you engage on social media, how you if you're advertising, what you want people to know. That's really where all of that comes to life. It's a lot of foundational work. It's a lot of guiding. I think a lot of those answers in our experience really lie on the inside of organizations about the future they want to create. And then as we get to market, no two companies are the same. And it's a process of really understanding who that target customer is, how we articulate that, understanding how we show up in the world, and then implementing it. I mean, I'm making it sound easy, but it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of guiding, and it's a lot of facing reality, and how do you keep that balance of vision with the reality of the business that you're dealing with and the resources that you have to make that happen.
Yeah, Imri, to piggyback off that last point about it sounds easy, but it most certainly is not easy. It reminds me, I don't think that listeners will fully appreciate hearing you say that. I know that this is probably something that I've not reached that point in my own entrepreneurial career just yet. Even having been in business for 15 years now, I haven't yet found, and it's obviously part my fault, part a level of intentionality, I haven't found that one big idea that, as you're saying it, you're talking about JetBlue, you're talking about Airbnb. I'm like, yes, every great brand has found that. For Apple, I remember for decades now, I've always told my friends about, I am a former Android user. And when I switched to Apple, I was like, everything just works. Like, that's the beauty of the Apple ecosystem. It's the one simple thing that explains Apple and their entire, whether you pick up an iPhone, an iPad, a MacBook, whatever it is, it's true of everything that they do and their process. When you walk into a store, even the buying experience is simple. There's no cash register. Turn to the nearest employee with an Apple logo embroidered on them. They'll check you out right then and there. So everything just works. It's also simple. But Imri, it reminds me of that Abraham Lincoln quote where he says, if you want me to give a 5-hour speech, I'm ready to go right now. If you want me to give a 5-minute speech, I'm going to need 5 hours to prepare. That's so hard. That simplicity is so hard. What's your best advice? You've done this with so many different brands. You continue to do it with your existing client roster. How do you even start getting there with so many things we want to stand for? How do we pick just one? I feel like parents must go through this where they always say, I can't pick a favorite. How do we start picking that favorite, Imri?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring up the Apple example because their positioning, their one idea that they stood for, that they actually used internally for years to get to that experience, was the anti-PC, and that was ultimately a conclusion that Steve Jobs came to when he came back to the company. I would say, never underestimate the value of an outside perspective and opinion about how you're being perceived as a brand and a company, because when your face is so close to the screen, sometimes it's hard to take a step back and really look at how you're being perceived in market, or what sort of assumptions that you're making about how people perceive you may not be real. Ultimately, I think that there's obviously a lot of value in bringing in an agency like Ariel to be able to provide that perspective and facilitate those conversations and help distill down. But if you're not at a point where you can really have the resources to bring in a consultant or an agency, I would say, what sort of friends, investors, what sort of parties do you have that you can engage with that will actually give you the hard truth? Because as an entrepreneur, like it's very much your baby, and it's important, I think, to surround yourself with people who aren't afraid to call your baby ugly, to use that analogy, because it's not until you face the hard truths of perception versus reality that you can really get down to what that one idea is going to be. And getting to that one idea means saying no to 100 good ideas. It's not easy.
Yeah, that's it. I love that. Who will call your baby ugly? I've never heard that expression, but it's so true. And you're right. And I'm obviously a big believer. It's why we have so many amazing guests on, because you're amazing at what you do. Like, that's abundantly clear for all of us here today to see that. And I think it is so important for us as entrepreneurs. Gosh, there's 1 million things we're all trying to figure out on a day-to-day basis. We are not experts at branding. We are certainly not experts at all of this identity, the higher level stuff that we're talking about here today. So I really love that. And I want to just appreciate you for how good you are at this stuff and how sharing and generous you are with all of this stuff here today, which leads me to the hardest part of the episode for every guest. Is I'm giving you the hard part, Imri, in summing up today's episode. We talked about so many ideas, a lot of actionable ideas, a lot of big ideas, a lot of homework that we all have. What's the takeaway you want every listener to get from today's episode? What's the one thing that as they hit stop on listening to today's show, they say, gosh, Imri's brilliant and I have a lot of homework to do and I need to focus on this? What's that takeaway you hope it is for them?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway, what really makes a successful brand and a malleable identity, is a singularity in a singular focus on one idea. I think that focus, that laser light focus, is going to be what really propels people and move forward. It's about saying no to all those great ideas, or, putting them on the shelf, because right now you really need to focus on getting known for this one thing. Maybe you're going under a shift in how you go to market, or maybe there's new technologies or competitors that are coming in. Like, really focusing in what's going to make the biggest impact on your business today, and how can you telegraph and get that to bring to life across everything you do when you're aligning brand, product, and experience. It's no simple task, but it's definitely worth the effort.
Yeah, and it's an important task. And I would argue that because it's not simple, it's why we avoid it. It's way easier to just go out and start sending emails. It's way easier to hop on Canva and just use some templates and throw it up on our social media accounts. But you're right. This is the hard stuff that we can't avoid because it's ultimately going to make the difference. We've seen we talked about so many different brands here today, and all of them, that's the constant theme across all of them, is they have that one thing that they're known for, that they're loved for, and that they have a lot of raving fans for. So Imri, gosh, gosh, you have been a wealth of knowledge. You blew my mind here today. I knew that you were going to be an amazing guest, but honestly, you have shown up in all the ways that I hoped for and then some. I know that listeners are going to be keen to find your own business, your own brand, what you're growing with Ariel. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here to follow all the awesome stuff that you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to check us out, we are Ariel, a brand development and identity agency. Our headquarters is in San Francisco, and you can see our website at ariel.fyi. That's AERIAL.fyi. And then any social media channels, our handle is Ariel_FYI, and we're constantly putting out content and are looking forward to sharing a lot of the work that we've done as it starts to go public and be released over the next few months. So check us out.
Yes, I love it. Listeners, of course, we're going to make it as easy as possible for you to find Ariel, the company that Imri and his partner are growing to do amazing work across so many different brands of all sizes. And as he said, you're going to want to see this work as it becomes public. Obviously, they're working behind the scenes with so many brands. So follow them on all the socials. Find those links down below in the show notes, wherever it is that you're tuning in. Otherwise, Imri, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your wisdom, being so generous with all of it here on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
All right. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking.